Assalamu alaikum, dear students. You are again welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we will discuss the textual questions, language work, and some characters of the story An Excellent Father, written by Jane Austen. So far, we have discussed the story, and now we will discuss the textual questions at page number 14. And after that, we will discuss the language work also. I have written the answers of questions only. ये जो questions है ये आप टेक्स्ट बुक से लिखोगे पेज नंबर 14 पर. क्वेश्चन नंबर 1 जो है, What does Mrs. Bennet tell her husband? इसका आंसर मैंने लिखा है, Mrs. Bennet tells her husband that a rich young man has come to take Netherfield Park, which was vacant for a long time. She also tells her husband that the young man is a bachelor, that means unmarried person. She feels that the rich man could be a good match for one of her unmarried daughters. Question number 2. Who takes over Netherfield Park? Why is Mrs. Bennet happy about it? Question number 2 का आंसर है Mrs. Bengley. A rich man takes over Netherfield Park. He's a young man from the north of England. He's a bachelor. Mrs. Bennet is happy about it as she has 5 unmarried daughters. She's concerned about their marriage. She feels that Mr. Bengley could be a good match for one of her daughters. She hopes that he will marry one of her daughters. Question number 3 है, why does Mrs. Bennet insist her husband to meet Mr. Bingley? Mr. Bingley is a rich and unmarried man. Mrs. Bennet finds in him a good match for any one of her marriageable daughters. She wants to take the advantage of the opportunity. That is why she insists her husband to visit Mr. Bingley as soon as possible so that they can make an acquaintance with him. Now question number 4. You take delight in vexing me. You have no compassion on my poor nerves. Explain. What does this line mean? When Mr. Bingley comes to stay in the neighborhood, Mrs. Bennet tells her husband to visit him, for she finds in him a good match for one of her daughters. But Mr. Bennet deliberately does not give positive ear to her words. He instead teases her with his comic remarks. उसको जोक बताता है, ये हमने पहले ही पढ़ा है. Mrs. Bennet feels irritated. She thinks her husband has no regard for her feelings and thoughts. That is why she says these words to her husband. Now question number 5. Why does Mrs. Bennet think that Mrs. Long is selfish? क्योंकि मिसिज लॉन्ग हमने पढ़ा है कि उसकी अपनी 2 नीसेस थी और मिसिज बेनेट को लगता था कि वो पहले उन दोनों को इंट्रोड्यूस कराएगी मिस्टर बिंगले के साथ और मेरी बेटियों की बारी नहीं आएगी. Mrs. Bingley thinks that Mrs. Long is selfish because the latter has 2 marriageable nieces of her own, and she too wants to take advantage of making an acquaintance with Mr. Bingley. Mrs. Bennet fears that Mrs. Long will not introduce her and her daughters with Mr. Bingley as she has promised them. She has an apprehension that Mrs. Long will opt Mr. Bingley for one of her own nieces and will not allow any other girl of marriageable age to snatch the opportunity. Then we have question number 6. How does Mr. Bennett react to the plan designed by his wife? At the outset, it seems Mr. Bennett is not interested in the plan. पहले लगता था कि वो उस प्लान में इंटरेस्ट नहीं है कि आप मिस्टर बिंगली के पास जाओ, उनसे दोस्ती करो. Designed by his wife, as he pretends to have no interest in Mr. Bingley. But later we find that he too has been eager to develop acquaintance with the young man. He visits the rich young man, but without saying it to his wife and daughters. When the ladies come to know about it, they get surprised. They now realize the fact that Mr. Bennet has been also equally worried about the girls like their mother. Then we have question number 7, last two question of this lesson. Why does Mrs. Bennet tell her girls that they have an excellent father? This is very important question. When Mrs. Bennet comes to know that her husband has already paid a visit to Mr. Bingley, she feels astonished. She realizes that her husband too has been worrying about their daughters and love them as much as she does. He has been just pretending that he is not interested to visit Mr. Bingley. That is the reason why Mrs. Bennet says her daughters that they have an excellent father. Now, the character sketch of Mrs. Bennet. मिसिस बेनेट का कैरेक्टर स्केच यहाँ मैंने लिखा है. इसके बाद मिस्टर बेनेट का कैरेक्टर स्केच. दिस आर द टू मेन कैरेक्टर्स ऑफ दिस स्टोरी. नावल में तो मेन कैरेक्टर्स हीरो और हीरोइन होते हैं, दैट इज़ मिस्टर बिंगले एंड Jane. But in this story, there are the main two characters are Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. Character sketch of Mrs. Bennet. Mrs. Bennet is one of the important characters of the lesson and excellent father. She has 5 daughters. She is a middle-aged woman of mean understanding, less understanding, little information and uncertain temper. Her only concern seems to see her daughters married to the men of large fortune. So she persuades her husband to visit Mr. Bingley as soon as possible, as she finds an opportunity in Mr. Bingley and does not want to miss it. Her husband teases her by cutting jokes on her sincerity and makes her exhaust in outrage. At the end, she is rewarded when her husband breaks the news that he has already visited Mr. Bingley. Being a mother of 5 girls, her concerns regarding their marriage seems to be genuine. She is also a humorous character, and her constant complaints about her poor nerves amuse the readers. Amuse करती है. Now the character sketch of Mr. Bennet. Mr. Bennet is an important character of the novel Pride and Prejudice. He is a middle-aged person living with his wife and 5 daughters. All her daughters are unmarried. He is full of wit and humor and takes delight in making his wife angry. He teases his wife by pretending not to be interested in Mr. Bingley. After reading the story, we come to the conclusion that he is an excellent father. He loves his daughters and is very serious about their marriage, but he does not express his seriousness openly like her wife. That is why he pretends to be disinterested in Mr. Bingley. Yet he is the first person to visit him. These are the two characters of the story, Mr. Bingley, the Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. Now the language work of this chapter. इसमें आपको find words from the passage having the following meanings. रेंट आउट किराया पर देना, टू लेट आउट इसका माने है। अनमैरिड सिंगल भी है, उसको हम कह सकते हैं। मेक समवन एंग्री, वैक्स इन ग्रेट हेस्ट जल्दी में कोई काम करना। अनविलिंग टू वेट, इम्पेशेंटली। नाउ पेज नंबर 15, इसमें भी दो है। टू लिव समवेयर परमानेंटली, सेटल उसको हम कहते हैं इंग्लिश में। इंटेंशन इरादा या प्लान कोई जो होता है उसको हम डिजाइन कहते हैं। द सेकंड पार्ट ऑफ दिस language work will be discussed in next video inshallah. This is related to grammar, subject and verb and their agreement. It will take a long time, and so this will be discussed in next video. Till that, goodbye.